4 generations.
Dates in the Bible don't quite match the marriage certificate. Uh-oh.
And welcome to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio roots sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Boy, have we got a story for you today. Yeah, it's the story of Jilayne Davidson, who was trying to find out about her birth father. She didn't know anything about him. She knew that he and her mom had separated when she was a year old, and she knew a few things from her mom, but not much else. Meanwhile, there's another family who knew this member of their family up till 1958 when he disappeared. Somehow the story comes together. You're going to want to hear the whole thing out of the mouth of Jilayne Davidson coming up in less than 10 minutes. Hey, if you haven't signed up for our weekly Genie newsletter yet, this is my weekly reminder. Get on the list. You can just sign up through our Facebook page or at ExtremeGenes.com. Hey, right now it's time to head out to Boston, Massachusetts, where David Allen Lambert is standing by, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. David, how you be?
I'm doing great, but I am a little blue about next year because I got the news that RootsTech is going to be virtual. Now, mind you, I love virtual events, and I'm looking forward to hopefully presenting and getting to see so much content. But I'll miss that one-on-one experience that we haven't had since 2020.
Well, I will too, but I think what they're doing is just playing it safe. Just
Absolutely.
Not knowing exactly how things are going to shake out through the rest of the year and all that. But they also have said moving forward after that, we'll see a combination of live and virtual. And, you can't argue with the success this past year. More people saw RootsTech. I mean, in
over
multiples.
1 million people.
Yeah. It was crazy. So it's great, and I'm excited that it's going to be back in whatever form.
Exactly. As long as there's a RootsTech, I want to be part of it. I know you've got the lead story with the gal with her dad that was found through the DNA, but another great DNA story is with Jordan Myers, a young lady who's 21 years old, thinking that her dad was a Puerto Rican boyfriend of her mother's. And it turns out she is actually a little different. The DNA shows that she was actually half Afghan. Well, you could have asked for a better success story because now she's in contact with the dad and he wants to make up for lost time. Oh, by the way, did I mention he's rich?
Yeah.
He wants to set her up for life.
Yeah, set her up for life. I mean, how does the DNA story get any better than that? We often hear people who are very worried. How am I going to be received? And rightfully so, and I understand that. Most stories turn out pretty good, actually. But this is off the charts.
Is great. And for those who watch TikTok, you can watch her exciting video explaining all this at Jordan the First on her TikTok page. Well, I love archaeological finds. And of course, I think of the symbol from the American Medical Association, the staff with the snake, from Moses, the 10 Commandments of Charlton Heston and all that, the Old Testament. Well, something right out of the Old Testament was found. Archaeologists have found a 4,400-year-old serpent staff in Finland. The boggy soil allows for many things to be preserved that normally would corrode. And this 1.5 meter length serpent staff was found, and it looks like a snake that's slithering along with the head of a serpent with an open mouth. It's something you really got to see to believe, but I'm like, who dropped that? So They don't know if it's some sort of a medicine man from long ago, but they date it from around 4,400 years ago, and it's made out of wood.
Wow. Of wood?
Of wood, yes.
That's incredible. And it survived. I hope that's in a museum soon.
I hope that it is being treated immediately so it won't disintegrate into sawdust soon.
Yeah, interesting.
You know, I get a great story here, the role of naval impressment in the American Revolution. And you may have probably seen this in your own ancestors if you had anybody in the Navy, that they had to take out seaman protection papers. The magnitude in this story from JSTOR Daily, which you'll find on extremegenes.com. And this story is great because it talks about the role of all of these sailors and the high percentage of them that were put into the British Navy and were, fighting against us, but were they in support of us because they were in there against their own will? You decide.
Yeah, well, there was 40% of the British Navy is said to have been impressed from people all over the world, but a lot of them were American seamen. It was a virtual kidnapping. And
it really was.
So
and
as a result of that, yes, and it changed a lot of the opinions of people about the mother country and really helped change opinions leading up to the Revolutionary War. But I just love the result of that for us as genealogists, that semen protection database that's on Ancestry. I was able to find the only known picture of my grandfather's brother who decided to work for this cruise ship company for 1 year in 1923. And they had to take his picture. And so because of that, I have the only photo ever found of him, which is fantastic.
One of the reasons we got into the War of 1812 was because the British were doing this with American sailors. They were going on American vessels and taking American residents and putting them on board and saying they were actually Brits. So these seaman protection papers go back quite a ways and will tell you sometimes where in America someone was born and gives you a clue before birth records existed.
Absolutely. And aside from the picture I found of my great uncle, there are also two others like that before photography that gave me a lot of information. So if you've never looked at the Semen Protection Program database on Ancestry, check it out. There could be some real gems in there for you.
And don't forget, collateral relatives count too.
Yep.
Well, that's about what I have from Beantown for you this week. And don't forget, if you're not a member of American Ancestors, you can sign up and use the coupon code EXTREME and save $20 on your membership.
All right, David, talk to you at the back end of the show for Ask Us Anything. And coming up next, a remarkable DNA discovery that united two families around one incident that took place in 1958. You're going to want to hear what Jilayne Davidson from Calgary, Alberta has to say coming up next in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Hey Genies, our sponsors at Ancestry have big news. They've completely redesigned the Ancestry mobile app. Now more than ever, the Ancestry app is your Genie travel companion. Check out their new photo line feature where your photos are turned into an amazing collage you can share on social media. Under Discover, check out your daily picks that shows you the most relevant hints to your research and stories and photos that may be on other people's family trees. You can also click on Pick Up Where You Left Off to see the last person you are working on. And all of this works in sync with your desktop at home. And in sync with newspapers.com, find out what happened on this day in history. And if you want to know what happened on a given day in your family history, use the new widget, Events in Your Family Tree, that gives you ancestral birth dates, death anniversaries, and wedding anniversaries. Plus, check out the Maps feature that ties to your family history. Download the new Ancestry mobile app today. Anytime is a great time to learn more about your family. Did you miss RootsTech Connect this year? It's not too late to experience RootsTech classes, keynotes, and how-to content. Just visit rootstech.org to see what you missed and to experience RootsTech Connect on your own timetable. Select inspiring and insightful messages that will help you in your pursuit to connect with and share your family story in new ways. You can then use the free resources found at FamilySearch.org or the Family Search Family Tree app to have a deeper personal experience getting to know your family, past and present. Connecting with family and learning about your ancestors provides healing, peace, and a sense of belonging. And it's easy to share what you learn with others to help and inspire them as well. Visit rootstech.org for some inspiration or visit FamilySearch.org to continue on your journey of family discovery today.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
Well, we all love what DNA can do for us these days. Hey, it's Fisher. It's Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. And my next guest, Jilayne Davidson, has a really unusual DNA story. She's in Calgary, Alberta. And Jilayne, welcome to Extreme Genes.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am so thrilled to talk to you about your story because it's an amazing one. Your mother told you, of course, that she had split up with your father back when you were a year old and moved to where you are now in Calgary, and that he was an indigenous person, and that was all you've known for all these years, and now all of a sudden you've got a little bit more.
Well, I did know a few other things. My mom did tell me that he was from Oklahoma.
Okay.
And she said that he was Cherokee, and she said that his parents' names were Nora and Victor.
Nora and Victor.
So those were the pieces of information I got when I was 12 years old, and my mom told me about my father.
Now, what was your father's name as you knew it?
William Baca.
Baca. But your parents were separated, obviously, or they never married. And then eventually you found out that your father had passed away in an accident in 1980 in a car crash.
Yeah, I probably found out that about 1978, between 1978 and 80. I can't really pinpoint it down. I know I was a teenage girl, and we got a phone call from a friend who knew both of us and knew our story, and he told my mom. And he called me and talked to me personally and told me that my father was killed in a car accident. And that was in northern British Columbia. And being a young girl, I just kind of let it go at that and just thought that I would never know my father. But my grandmother did tell me at the same time, once I did learn about him and about his death, she confessed to me that she had received letters from him over the years. But because I was adopted by my stepfather, and they had separated by this point as well. So she told me, though, your dad has been sending letters, and unfortunately I've thrown them out. And she apologized to me and had reconsidered and decided it was a mistake. So that was a little sad.
Not bad.
Yeah. He had been trying to keep in touch the best he could.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you decide, wait a minute, we have a new tool out here. We can take advantage of this. At what point did you say, I've got to do the DNA test to see what I can find out?
Well, since it's come out, it's always humming and hawing, and I don't know exactly. It seemed like something was always getting in my way. And I think partly, too, is I had searched for my father since I was in my 20s. And I did manage to find my half-brother without the help of DNA back in the mid-90s.
Okay.
For me, I did manage to go and meet my brother up in Terrace, BC. His name is Sam Baca. The only way I found my brother is that he was named after my father's alien. His name is William Baca. And everybody calls him Sam. So I was trying to find my indigenous heritage, and I was trying to prove that, actually, to be able to work for this organization. And I also heard my grandparents were Mormons. So by this time, I had written several Cherokee nations and gotten nowhere. I had checked the Mormon registry and had gotten nowhere for Victor and Nora Baca. So finally, I thought, I'm going to try and call the RCMP and find out about my father's accident, and maybe I'll get some clues there. So I called up to Terrace, BC, and I spoke to an RCMP officer, and she told me she knew a William Baca. And I was really perplexed because she said he was younger than me. she knew of him because he was a security guard at the mall.
Oh, wow.
So she was, yes. So that's why his name rang a bell. And so she sent an officer, and he went and got a hold of my brother, who was on vacation. But when he did call me and we compared notes, that he was Cherokee and Spanish, he was from Oklahoma. His parents' names were Nora and Victor. My brother had that information as well. So, yeah, I flew up. I met him. It was a surprise for Sam. So me and his wife, we connived and together and flew up there on Halloween, and I knocked on the door, and he opened the door and handed me and my daughter a bag of chips and shut the door. We didn't have any costumes on or anything, and then so his family was yelling, "Sam, open the door!" He opened the door, and he recognized it was me, and the reunion was on.
Oh, my gosh. So you started this long before DNA came along, and you probably figured this has got to be it. Whatever he knows about your dad would be all you'd ever learn.
That was it. I saw pictures of my dad. I went and we drove the highway between Prince Rupert and Terrace, which is the highway my father died on. And then we had also stood over my father's grave. And for me, that did bring me in an incredible amount of peace. And I kind of figured, after everything else I had tried, that this was the end of the road.
Sure. And are you still in touch with Sam?
Yes, we've been in touch ever since. We talk quite often. We actually have quite a strong connection. So that's kind of been a very interesting thing, too, that we have this connection. Actually, we talk to each other a few times a month. So
that's awesome. And I would imagine after all that's happened since, you have a lot more to talk about.
Well, yes, he's actually going to be down my way here, so we're hoping we're going to have some time together here at the end of the month. And, so looking forward to that for sure.
Fantastic. So let's fast forward now to the DNA period here, and you finally got onto this bandwagon as you were held up over time. And what was it that was keeping you from doing it? Did you just figure, no, I've kind of got a good feel of this now, or did you just finally decide, well, maybe there's something more to find?
Well, I kind of asked myself that question too, because I was thinking about it. Something was always coming up. I was kind of afraid that if I did this DNA, maybe it would come up empty again. Mm-hmm. There was a fear of that, and there was a fear of things just always coming up. And then just this past February, I seen Ancestry. There was a deal. I said, that's it, I'm doing it. And I just got on it right away, ordered the rush test.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get it done. Let's do it now. And never in my wildest dreams did I expect the results that we got.
Well, what did you see first of all among your matches? I would imagine, though, the first thing you wanted to see was the ethnicity results, right?
Yes. And that was a surprise as well, because, believing my father, I did get the indigenous part, and also he has a little bit of Swedish in him.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So I was kind of like, that's very different than what we knew, because we thought it was Cherokee and Mexican. Of course, it didn't specify the actual nation that he comes from. But, so from there, and then, of course, I went into the DNA matches of my cousins and first cousins.
Were you aware of matches and how matching works with DNA?
Not at all. I was just kind of lost on the website, because once you get your DNA results, you get to register it, and then I kind of delved in. And to be honest, the actual history of going back so long wasn't really something that I was too terribly concerned with. I was more concerned with this hole in my soul that I've had for years of wanting to know about my family and my father.
And you didn't realize that the matches could give you more than any of that ethnicity.
Oh, I was stunned. I was stunned because they were Canadian, the matches that I had.
Okay, all right.
So I was like, okay, well, my dad was living in Canada, so perhaps everybody moved up to Canada at some point. So I sent a message to a few of them, and then my second cousin's wife, who manages his tree, got a hold of me, and I am so grateful to Eileen. she did write me back, and we kind of exchanged information, and I sent her a picture of my dad, and I was able to look at her tree, which is something you can do when you have a DNA match, is you can look at other people's tree. And there I saw my grandparents' names, Nora and Victor, except they were not the Bacas. They were under the name Sinclair. It was Nora and Victor Sinclair.
Now, when you saw that, what was your first reaction, Jilayne?
Completely confused.
I bet.
I never heard the name Sinclair and didn't know quite what to make about it, but I did share that with Eileen and said, these names sound familiar, but the last name's not at all. And so apparently I sent her a picture that my brother had given me of my father, and she was in touch with my aunt, who is my dad's last living sibling, Darlene, and sent the picture to her. And she said, "Oh my gosh, he looks just like the Sinclair boys." And so she sent me back this poster that was just devastating because it was the Canadian Missing Persons poster. Oh,
and so this is the first you really knew that your dad was a missing person.
Yes, that's when I saw that poster, I was overcome. It really was. I was shaking. Well, I didn't even know how to process it.
Well, didn't your mom kind of imply to you that your dad was quite secretive, and that was one of the reasons that she broke up with him?
I don't think she said he said he wanted to marry her but couldn't. And of course, I was born in 1964, so I'm giving away my age. But those were different times. Mm-hmm. And my mom wanted to be married. I mean, she was having his child. That's it. And so she just assumed that the reason why he wouldn't, because he kept telling her, "I want to marry you, but I can't." And he said, "I can't tell you why." And so she just assumed he was married and refusing to get divorced.
Right.
And unfortunately,
of course, he wasn't married, though.
No. He had actually, his story is quite tragic when you start to think about it. Of course, I have. And it's quite emotional because it was really changed the trajectory of many people's lives.
All right, let's take a break right there then and come back and talk about that story and the trajectory that it changed when we return in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Hey, we're back on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. I'm talking to Jilayne Davidson from Calgary, Alberta. And Jilayne's been telling us all about her dad, an indigenous man from Canada with a mysterious background. She never knew him. She actually tracked down a half-brother some time back who's become very close to her. But recently, with DNA, she's made some fascinating discoveries, including the background of why her dad was so mysterious. And Jilayne, let's just go back there now from what you've learned about Mervyn Sinclair, a.k.a. your dad, William Baca.
Yes, well, back then, it was 1958, and of course, that was a different time as well, a few years before my birth. And my father went into the military. And he had a bad experience there and was supposed to head off to Vancouver, from what I was told, and decided to go home because of what had happened to him there. And when he returned home, that was back in Pinochet, I believe, Saskatchewan, he went home for the long weekend and reported to his siblings that somebody had attempted to sexually assault him, and a corporal, somebody who was a superior to him. And, of course, he responded, and there was violence. He was afraid to return. He was afraid to go back to the military base and afraid of what would happen once he did return, because apparently the corporal had threatened him, and afraid to go to jail. So he never did return. Apparently somebody had seen him hitchhiking back to Wainwright, which is a piece that I still can't quite put together from everything I've learned. But he never did show up, and he was gone. And the family, the Sinclair family back in Saskatchewan, sometime later received his belongings that were full of blood. So that was very concerning for them.
Huh.
They never knew what happened to him.
Where did they come from? Were they from the military?
Yes, they were what he left behind. The military had sent him his belongings home.
Okay. So the assumption was that he'd likely been murdered?
They didn't know. My Aunt Darlene talked a little bit about it, but just that they didn't know. They heard so many things over the years. So, my dad he left. He went and ended up somehow in the Sundre area, where my mom is from. He was working as a ranch hand, and my mom fell in love with him, and he just carried on with his life under this assumed name of William Baca.
Amazing.
Which he managed to keep that. And the whole story, he said his parents' real name, but never actually gave the last name. So what an incredible secret to keep. Yeah.
Wow. So you'd always heard Nora and Victor, but you didn't realize it wasn't Baca. It was Sinclair.
That's right.
And so your dad actually has a sister still living right now. And what was her response when she heard that you had emerged as a result of this DNA test?
Oh, she wanted to meet me right away, which I don't blame her. I mean, their family has been looking for him for their entire life. So she came over to meet me pretty much immediately. I think I met her like the next day after she had learned that.
Really?
Yeah, it was looking like I was, And I was lucky because she actually lives in Calgary.
Really?
So, yes. Yeah, so that is another fortunate piece of synchronicity that kind of, worked together. So I've been able to spend some time getting to know my Auntie Darlene.
And the sad thing is you also had an uncle who had searched for your dad for 50 years who just died late last year.
Yes, Ralph Sinclair. My uncle, he was looking for my dad and actually did a piece with the Dawson City News about my dad's disappearance, what had happened, what they suspected in the military. There was another story about my father being the septic tank Sam, which is another mystery here in Alberta, where they found a body like 40 years ago in a septic tank that had been horribly murdered. And oddly enough, that mystery has now been solved as well. But before they had DNA, they just thought it was a possibility. But my uncles both submitted their DNA, so they were able to prove that my dad was in fact not septic tank Sam.
Wow. And, what a name.
Yeah.
So how long has it taken you to get your head all around this amazing story?
I'm still working on that, to be honest with you.
How's it changed your life? I mean, have you met all these people? Have you had reunions?
No, not yet. We just learned this like in February. So, and then of course now there's been an RCMP investigation.
Okay, for people here, that's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Yes. Yeah, this is basically to close the missing persons case for my father. Yeah, and we're hoping from that point on we'll be able to put him to rest properly with his correct name on his marker and stuff like that. But first we have to be able to close the missing persons case.
So how are they going about that? Because obviously your DNA matched to Darlene and to Ralph's son Podge. I mean, that has to be a big key to this investigation. Do they understand the power of DNA that they have in their hands?
Well, this has been a little bit of an interesting. I think it's confusing for some other folks, even those in my family, because I mean there's now the DNA from the ancestry test that originally brought us all together, and now there's also been a DNA match through DNA from the RCMP. So apparently the case is not completely closed yet. So the police, of course, the RCMP don't want to comment, I don't believe, until everything is finalized. But it seems pretty cut and dry, like you said, with the DNA that my dad is Mervyn Sinclair, and now we can all know what happened to him, know his story, and be able to put him to rest. And I really hope that somehow, some way he knows and is watching all this. And feels some kind of peace. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because you would think for the Sinclairs, they now know what happened after he disappeared. And for you and your brother Sam, you now know what happened to him before he showed up in your life.
Yes. Yes. It's a huge piece. The puzzle has been solved. So I am so grateful. Submitting your DNA, you never know what might come up.
Right.
But you know what I'm saying? This is going to be bring peace So a lot of people. There's still some stuff that we need to do. Like, I do want to meet my family, and I do, want to know more. And I have learned a lot. Like, it's so weird. When I first did my ancestry tree, I had my mom's side of my family going back until my great-great-grandparents. And then I just had William back on the other side. And now I have the same, I have ancestries going right back to my great-great-grandparents on both sides.
Isn't that a thrill?
That's a thrill, and it's such a gift to be able to pass down to my grandchildren, too. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
We know who we are.
Especially as you add the stories of Mervyn's parents and grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just life-changing stuff. Well, congratulations. What do you hope is going to happen next? And is anybody writing a book about this?
Well, we have a few. I have some very, very interesting people that are in my family. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to get together and get to know one another. And perhaps maybe even there might be a documentary in the works. But I'm not, we're not 100% sure yet. I think we're all just assimilating this new information.
Well, when you consider you've got a missing person case that's 50 years old, you've got the DNA component, you got everybody wondering what came before, what came after, nobody knows, and finally it's all resolved. I mean, it would make a great documentary, and I would watch it. So
Thank you.
Put on your makeup, be ready. We're ready to see that whole thing. She's Jilayne Davidson from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and she is the daughter of Mervyn Sinclair, a.k.a. William Baca. And now they know who he is, where he came from, and where he went. Great story, Jilayne. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And coming up next, David Allen Lambert returns as we do another round of Ask Us Anything, answering your questions on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, in 3 minutes.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
Anytime is a great time to learn more about your family. Did you miss RootsTech Connect this year? It's not too late to experience RootsTech classes, keynotes, and how-to content. Just visit rootstech.org to see what you missed and to experience RootsTech Connect on your own timetable. Select inspiring and insightful messages that will help you in your pursuit to connect with and share your family story in new ways. You can then use the free resources found at FamilySearch.org or the Family Search Family Tree app to have a deeper personal experience getting to know your family, past and present. Connecting with family and learning about your ancestors provides healing, peace, and a sense of belonging. And it's easy to share what you learn with others to help and inspire them as well. Visit rootstech.org for some inspiration or visit FamilySearch.org to continue on your journey of family discovery today. Hey Genies, our sponsors at Ancestry have big news. They've completely redesigned the Ancestry mobile app. Now more than ever, the Ancestry app is your Genie travel companion. Check out their new photo line feature where your photos are turned into an amazing collage you can share on social media. Under Discover, check out your daily picks that shows you the most relevant hints to your research and stories and photos that may be on other people's family trees. You can also click on Pick Up Where You Left Off to see the last person you were working on. And all of this works in sync with your desktop at home and in sync with newspapers.com. Find out what happened on this day in history. And if you want to know what happened on a given day in your family history, use the new widget, Events in Your Family Tree, that gives you ancestral birth dates, death anniversaries, and wedding anniversaries. Plus, check out the Maps feature that ties to your family history. Download the new Ancestry mobile app today. We are back for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. David Allen Lambert is in the house. And David, our first question for this segment comes to us from Les Holmgren in Minneapolis. And he writes, Fisher and Dave, what records have an ancestor's height? My family's really tall, and we want to see how far back tall goes. Les, good question. Wow.
Well, first thing that comes to mind is military.
Yeah.
I mean, your draft registration cards of World War I, World War II always give you some sort of a physical description. You may get it in surviving school records. Of course, you want the later years, not the first grade. Yeah, you want to wait for adolescence to kick in. Yeah. How about you? Have you found anything that's been good for?
Yeah, actually, this doesn't have to do with military so much, at least not directly, but in the War of 1812, they kept track of enemy aliens in New York City. And so they would go around and they would register all the people there. And there were actually two different versions of it. One was from the Navy and one was from the county sheriff, I believe, over 2 different years. And they would put the height of the principal enemy alien in there. So I had a British third great grandfather who had not naturalized yet. So as an enemy alien, they had to register him, and his height was on that.
Do you know, another thing that just came to mind, newspaper ads for people who were runaways, may it be an enslaved person, or maybe your ancestor was indentured to someone and he broke the contract and ran away. The other thing, jail records.
Oh,
you want to keep track of those prisoners, you know, how tall they are when they run away.
Right, and you have a lot of those in your family.
I do. Grandpa was 5'10".
Well, and I remember another one, speaking of which, is I had an ancestor in London who abandoned the family, and that left the care of the family to the local parish church. They did not like that. So they put an ad in the newspaper, described his height, they described what he looked like, they described the clothes he was wearing, last seen, what he did for a living, who he last worked for, the name of his wife, and the fact he'd left behind 5 kids, and they were offering a tuppence for his return, something like that. Anyway, that gave his description that way. You can often get even a lot more than height. You know, you can get those physical descriptions on many of these different ads.
And modern records, think of driver's license files. They're going to have your height on.
Oh, wow.
So
that would be good.
And of course, in your kitchen, if you had kids growing up, chances are you scratched or etched or sharpied their height on it. So don't forget, before you move or paint over it, take a picture of it and make a permanent record. You
know, it's always frustrating to me when I find a record like the military ones you're talking about. Some of the draft registrations, especially in World War I, it wasn't, you know, he's 5'8 3/4. It was tall, short, or medium. That was it. And the build was that way, too. And it's like, oh, come on, give us a little more than that. I want specifics to see where I got my height or lack of it.
So I guess the real thing here is write down in your own family record how tall you are, your spouse is, your kids are as adults, your grandkids once they turn the late teenage years, and, you know, keep track of that thing. And also hair color, eye color, and all that. I mean, it's all important. And DNA does tell us some things,
That's true.
But it may not tell us exactly how tall our ancestor is. So if you get that fact in your head now, write it down.
It just occurred to me that I also have a record that was passed down from some cousins. They kept a record of the family from the 19th century, and they wrote a physical description of all these people with their height on there as well. So, yeah, those things are out there. You just got to look in different places. You got to get a little creative sometimes. But great question, Les, and thank you for it. And coming up next, we have another one coming from Los Alamos, New Mexico, in 3 minutes when we return on Extreme Genes Genes, America's Family History Show. Okay, back at it. It's our final question this week for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. Fish here. It's David Allen Lambert over there from the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. And Dave, this question comes from Deborah Brink in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and she says, guys, love the show. I'm trying to find out which of my ancestors were literate. How can that be determined? Good question. Deborah, where do you want to start with that, Dave?
Well, I mean, we can start with more recent things, like our kids will show up in the newspaper for the spelling bees, and so did maybe our parents and our grandparents, because the newspapers will talk about those who graduated from high school or from grammar school. But the federal census, starting in the 19th century, would record whether or not a person could read or write. So there's a place that the census enumerator took down that information for you.
That's really good.
There's a lot of different records that are out there. And Robert Charles Anderson, who is the scholar of the Great Migration, for the early New Englanders that came over between 1620 and 1640, when he did these sketches, he includes education. And that doesn't mean, Fish, that they went to Oxford University. That means that in the inventory of their estate, they had a Bible or another book of scripture or maybe some other books that shows that obviously he or she could read. And the other thing is probate, because when you look for your ancestors' probate, we may not have a photo of our ancestor, but the signature shows that they were literate, that they could write.
Yeah, and in wills from the 18th, 19th centuries also can tell you whether or not they had books in their inventory. That would be useful. What's interesting to me about all this too, Dave, is a lot of people couldn't write their names back in the day. They would put an initial. For instance, we have one on my wife's side named Elisha Stout, came from Monmouth County, New Jersey, and he used the letter E for Elisha as his mark. And there are a lot of genealogists out there who said his name was Elisha E. Stout because that's how it appeared. That's how it appeared in the record. And it's like, no. That meant he couldn't write. That was just his initial for his first name.
This is even like with the middle initial that you find on ladies in the 1700s, that maybe they're listed as Mary S. Johnson. Well, the S isn't her middle name is Susan. It's the S is because her maiden name is Stewart, and somebody may have jotted it down that way.
Yeah, it's possible. There were really very few people who had middle names before the 19th century. I mean, it was really, really rare.
It is, and you start to see them come into vogue around the American Revolutionary War, where you get George Washington this and Thomas Jefferson that. But before that, it's just biblical names for the most part, and just one name, which makes it great when you're looking for your John Smith in northern New Hampshire.
I can think of one, though, from the 18th century, John Paul Jones, right?
Well, yeah, and there were exceptions to the rules. I mean, of course,
many.
No, not a lot. I mean, out of a percentage of 100, you're probably dealing with 15, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that's just an estimated guess. But if you look at the vital records in the 16 and 1700s, find ones that have middle names, and you probably will not find as many as you might find, say, on a online tree.
There you go. Well, there you go, Deborah. If you want to know if your ancestors were literate, could they write their name? Do they have books in their inventory of their estate or mentioned somewhere else in the records? I think those things are about it, really, Dave.
Yeah, there really is, unless, of course, you have personal family papers that might give you that clue, too. Diaries that somebody may have kept, letters, postcards, whatever, and that may give you an added clue. But that's on a personal and family history level on your own family archive. Oh,
there you go. That's Ask Us Anything for this week. Thank you, Deborah, for the question. And, of course, if you have a question for Ask Us Anything, just email us at askusanything@extremegenes.com. David, talk to you next week.
Talk to you soon.
And that is our show for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks once again to Jilayne Davidson for coming on the show and talking about her amazing discovery that's united two families around an event that took place in 1958. If you missed the story or want to catch it again, of course, catch the podcast. Talk to you next week. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.